Frostpunk 2 is the follow-up to the critically acclaimed Frostpunk. This franchise is known for its brutal survival city building gameplay, where you're tasked with not just building a city but keeping it alive in a frozen hellscape. The story is set in an alternate version of the 1800s where steam power technology advanced way beyond anything from the actual history books, allowing humanity to build highly advanced machines. But of course it all goes to hell when volcanoes across the world erupt and spew enough volcanic material into the stratosphere to block out the sun, kicking off what is known as the Great Frost. As a result of this, everything goes from bad to worse and the planet plunges into a brutal ice age. Before things went sideways, the British Empire had sent expeditions up to the north to investigate the crazy changings in the climate. They built these massive heat-generating generators to keep the people warm in case the worst happened. Well, guess what? The worst did happen. The world froze over and those expeditions turned into colonies, sheltering the last remains of humanity. In the first game, you step into the boots of the captain to lead one of these colonies. As you expand your settlements, build insanely complex steampunk machinery, and try to keep your growing population alive, all while the cold is constantly at your throat. And just when you think you've got things under control, a massive frost storm hits. After surviving the brutal weather anomaly, we fast forward 30 years into the future. The captain's now an old relic on their deathbed, resources are stretched thin, and the colony's only real option is to expand or face extinction. Frostpunk 2 kicks off with the captain's death as now you step into the role as the steward. But unlike the first game where the captain ruled with absolute authority, things have changed. You can't just crack open the book of laws and enact anything you want on a whim. Now you've got to propose and debate your laws in a council before they are put into action. That means arguing, manipulating, making promises to scrap together a 51% majority in the council. Unlike the old adaptation 3 where you choose between the order and faith paths, laws are now split into 4 categories: survival, city, society, and rule. Each one has its own policies to help you keep the city in order, from deciding how resources are allocated, boosting efficiency, and even setting the ethical standards of your society. The rule category is where things get interesting, offering laws that give you more judicial muscle like swinging votes, establishing propaganda centers, or even forming your own guard militia to stamp on dissent. Push these laws far enough and you could claw your way back to full authority, taking up the mantle as captain once again and ruling with an iron fist. When proposing a law, you can sway the council members by making promises, like researching something specific or building a particular structure. Once you hit that vote button, you'll need to secure over 50% approval to pass the law, otherwise it's rejected and you'll have to wait to the next council session to try again.
Hear ye, the votes are in, the measure fails.
For rule laws though, you're going to have to get a 2/3 majority. Oh yeah, and nothing is set in stone once you pass a law. You can change it, but you have to go to the council all over again. Honestly, I like this new law system. In the first game, you could steamroll any decision through. Here you have to be more strategic with your promises, because if you don't deliver within the set time frame, you'll be facing some real consequences. The broader variety of laws is also a welcome change, giving you more options that unlock as you progress through research. Frostpunk 2 ups the ante on gameplay, this time it's on a more macro scale. Your population can grow a lot faster and get much larger, and you're no longer building individual buildings or laying down roads brick by brick. Instead, you're constructing entire districts and expanding the colony using a new mechanic, frostbreaking. You'll need to flatten the frosty wasteland to make room for districts and uncover precious resources like materials and food. There are different types of districts you can set up. Housing districts for sheltering your people, extraction districts for gathering resources, industrial districts for producing materials, food districts for growing crops, and logistics districts for sending out frozen teams to explore in the frozen wasteland. Districts in Frostpunk 2 come with various abilities to boost community trust or ramp up worker productivity. But now you manage the number of workers in each district through a slider instead of directly assigning them. You can still place individual buildings within districts like hospitals, watchtowers, and ventilation centers. You can even expand districts to increase housing capacity and open up more building slots. If you place districts close together, they'll benefit from a heat bonus, and you can always set up heat hubs to keep things warm. Depending on how you organize your districts, you'll earn bonuses or suffer penalties. Now I've got mixed feelings about the new building system. On one hand, the micromanagement is different compared to the first game, where you had more control over every little detail. But on the other hand, this new approach adds a level of flexibility with different building types and the ability to arrange districts in different ways to synergize for maximum efficiency. It's definitely a fresh take on the genre and I've got to give it credit for that.
Good job.
The resource system had a bit of an overhaul too. Instead of collecting wood, steel and coal separately, resources are bundled into prefabs and materials. Prefabs are used for creating districts and buildings while materials handle upkeep. Given the large scale of the game, this streamlined approach makes sense. That said, coal and food are still around. Coal powers your generator, and as you progress you'll even have the option to switch to oil. Later on you can increase the heat of the generator by consuming more oil, or you can make it more adaptable to other sources of fuel like steam. Food meanwhile works similarly to the first game, but instead of hunting you now need to extract it.
Extraction!
There are of course some new resources to manage. Heat stamps and goods. Heat stamps act like currency or labor tokens and you'll need them for just about everything. They are scarce early on, so spend wisely. Goods on the other hand are consumer items that help keep the populace happy, obedient and crime-free. To be frank, the moment-to-moment gameplay is mostly solid, but it can get a bit overwhelming with the larger scale compared to the first game. Thankfully you don't have to micromanage every single district, or it would be pure chaos. Overall, I dig the variety and scale, but I kinda miss the micromanagement of the original. So in this game the faction system is completely overhauled. Gone is the old dual faction setup where you had to choose between two authoritarian systems or pit workers against technocrats. Now you've got factions like the Stalwarts, Evolvers, Faithkeepers and Pilgrims. As the game progresses, depending on your playstyle and who you favor, more factions will appear. Factions essentially act like political parties within your colony, each with their own beliefs and agendas, trying to shape the society and their image. Members of these communities make up the council, and they'll be influenced by laws aligned with their ideals. You can sway factions by making promises, allowing them to pursue their agendas and letting them pass specific laws during the council sessions. The faction you side with will basically influence the direction of your city, shaping the zeitgeist, basically the prevailing spirit or ideology of the colony. Are your citizens more traditional or do they lean towards more reason? Do they embrace the Frost or fight it with technology? Will you build a meritocracy or strive for equality? Depending on the path you choose for your citizens, you'll unlock certain bonuses and new tech options for your research tree. All in all, the faction system is a big step up from the first game. It adds more depth, gives the people you're governing some actual character, and offers way more options than before. It's definitely an improvement that brings more life to your leadership decisions.
Decisions.
The research tree in Frostpunk has been greatly expanded, to say the least, giving you a ton of different abilities and buildings to unlock. The research is divided into 4 categories like heating, resources, Frostland, city, society and hubs. Unlike the more structured tree in the first game, it feels a bit more scattered here, but there's way more to discover and some techs even unlock new laws. From generator upgrades and alcohol policies to labor laws, maintenance duties, hospitals, youth organizations, you name it. Some research laws can take you down some seriously dark paths, like building asylums, human harvesting experimentations, or sending children to work in the mines. It's all the classic Frostpunk grimness we all know and love. This is a massive upgrade from the first game, and I love how many more options you have here. It synergizes perfectly with the new law system and gives you a lot more room to shape the society how you see fit. Done away are the discontent and hope systems, now you've got trust and tension, which basically work the same way. If you have too much tension and not enough trust, factions get ready to riot, or worse. You can keep things under control by fulfilling promises, granting agendas, policing the streets, and of course not screwing up too bad. Just like in the previous game, you still got to deal with cold, hunger and disease, which means increasing heating, building more houses, setting up hospitals and securing a steady supply of food. But wait, there's more. Now you've got new problems to handle, like crime. This becomes a big issue if people don't have enough goods to keep them happy. And then there's squalor, which is basically a mix of rusting, rotting and polluting all rolled up into one.
You know, bombed, pickled, polluted.
Not having enough materials or adequate ventilation in your housing can make squalor a huge headache. Let any of these problems fester for too long and tensions will rise, trust will plummet and society will be on the brink of chaos. Not much else to add here, but the tension and trust system feels like a solid improvement over the mechanics of the previous game. Exploration has gotten a serious tune-up from the first game. You are no longer sending out a handful of scout teams, but hundreds of explorers and large expedition teams and guard squads. You create these expedition teams through logistic districts, and yes, there are upgrades to make them even bigger. The Frostland is divided into unexplored regions, each varying in danger levels. When you send out a team, some members may not make it back depending on the risk.
It's dangerous.
By exploring the Frostland you can find points of interest like locations with extractable resources that your teams can bring back. Now you can even set up outposts in some places and link them back to your main colony to gather various resources. You'll encounter stranded people struggling to survive, nomads guarding their territory, and if you're feeling bold, you can raid them with your guard teams. You can even establish multiple colonies, essentially setting up smaller versions of your main settlement and transferring over people to colonize and extract resources. While the exploration system is an improvement, it doesn't feel like the world is big enough. By the midpoint I had already explored most of the map, and the sense of mystery and intrigue for the first game wasn't quite there. Time works mostly the same, although it doesn't crawl as slowly as it did in the first game. Where the original campaign took 40 to 60 in-game days to wrap up, now you'll be spending hundreds of weeks on this one, so settle in and get comfortable.
Buckle up.
The story is divided into 5 chapters. As I mentioned, the campaign kicks off with the old captain's death and you stepping up as the steward. Each chapter throws a new obstacle your way, from dealing with scarce resources and deciding whether to allow refugees into your colony, to figuring out how far you're willing to push the generator's limits, or whether or not to colonize the Frostland. Your decisions will make some factions happy while pissing off others, so choose wisely. Lastly, a quick shout out to the music. It's simply amazing. The score does an incredible job of setting the tone and atmosphere. Really pulling you into the harsh world of Frostpunk 2. And that brings me to my final thoughts on this game. As a whole, I've got to say I like this game. It's expanded and improved a lot of aspects from the first one, but even though it acted as a sequel, it's really become its own beast, moving away from the small-scale society builder approach of the original. It's definitely carved out a unique spot for itself in the survival city builder genre. I haven't played anything quite like it. But with everything I've said, would I recommend this game to newcomers of the genre? Well, no, and there are 3 main reasons for that. First off, while the game's presentation is great and the UI looks sleek, there's just way too much information to take in. It can be overwhelming even for someone who is familiar with the genre. Second, I was hoping for more cutscenes and voice acting this time around, at least with some important characters. Given that the game operates on such a macro scale, it makes you feel detached from the people you're supposed to be leading. It's hard to feel invested in the society when you're so far removed from the individual members. And finally, sorry to say it, but the tutorial in this game is hot garbage. Sure, you can read up on how things work, but the information provided is as bare bones as it gets. The onboarding doesn't explain a lot of the key elements, like how industrial districts produce heat stamps, that districts can share workers, or how certain mechanics impact your society. You don't really get a full picture of where a branch of the tech tree will take you, which is a pretty big deal when it comes to planning ahead in this game. Combine that with the visual clutter of the UI, and learning how to play feels more like a slog than it should be, which is why I recommend you watch guides before starting the game. So overall, while there are plenty of positives here and the game is fun once you get past the learning curve, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for a first time player. If you're new to this kind of game, I suggest playing the first Frostpunk and checking out some guides on the mechanics before diving in. So that's the video, thank you for watching and see you next time.